Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and today is the, what are we actually? We are at the 19th of February. Is that what today is? I don't even know what day it is. It's a Wednesday, I think. Hey, Melissa. Okay. Oh, Joanne, good morning. I'm not sure who Melissa is unless, is Melissa on already? Okay. That's why you're saying hello to Melissa. Hello. It's funny. Joanne's comment came on before Melissa's. So good morning to both of you. This is, I think it's Wednesday. And I'm kind of waking up and not having, just thinking about all the things I've got to get done this week that are kind of unpleasant. And Kathleen's on and Alex is on. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to both of you. To all four of you. I have... this is a week where I've got Reiki classes this weekend that I have to prepare for. I'm doing kind of both ends of the spectrum. I'm doing Reiki Master one day and I'm doing Reiki 1 the next day. And I've also got to get taxes done this week and I've got to get grading done. So basically, after a couple days off, it's kind of like now I'm being a little whiny about having to get back into it. Oh, and Kelsey, good morning. Good to see you. I will also be doing a Katonia live stream today at noon. I have a video to put up. I have to create my video this morning. I should have done it yesterday, but I'm a little late with the podcast because of it was a subject that I needed to do a lot more thinking and a lot more research before I got started with it. So I need to go back and and put that up this morning. It's already up for Patreon, but I'm going to have to put it up for everybody else. So creating the video doesn't take that long. It takes maybe half an hour. So I will do that and then get that live. And then I move on to all the other stuff that I have to do. But I am going to do a Katonia live stream at noon. The subject is really interesting because the deity that I'm covering is Lua Saturni, who is... sometimes she's considered to be the wife of Saturn. Sometimes she's connected with the Roman grain goddess Ops. She seems to have sort of Etruscan type origins. So it did turn out to be kind of a fascinating rabbit hole. Podcast was great. Oh, thank you, Alex. Yes, because you're on Patreon, so you would have seen it already. And and of course Sam and I have been talking about it. As we know, Sam's the one who, Lua was already on my list. But I know Sam had asked me about doing Lua a very long time ago, and just like I've been waiting for you to do this one. So so naturally we've been having an email conversation about it, about the topic and everything that I kind of went into. Yeah, it ended up being kind of a very interesting rabbit hole of things around the electric universe theory and ideas about Saturn and connections to not only Etruscan mythology but to other ones. And it is kind of there were so many different threads that had to be kind of pulled in. And Suda, good morning. Good to see you. Trying to pull all these things in. It did get to be a little bit, I wanted to make sure it was well organized and that I had read through everything I wanted to read through. And I taught classes and I had sessions all weekend, last weekend. I feel like I'm a little bit behind on things, especially administrative stuff, and I'm just kind of like saying, okay, I've just got to get through all the things that I've been avoiding that eventually I will get to deadlines that I can't avoid, like my taxes. So I want to make sure I get all of that stuff done this week. Anyway, okay, so my topic today is going to be interesting. This is not what I really anticipated talking about, but I saw something yesterday. I was when I take a break in between, I'm having breakfast or, stopping for lunch or whatever, I will watch some YouTube. And let me just, excuse me a moment. So we have I basically have this, this thing where, I was watching videos. And I saw this video that was put up by Lon Milo Duquette. Now, Lon is somebody who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And there was nothing wrong with the video. I mean, the video was fine. But the video was interesting because it had to do with working with angels, which is something we've talked about here. And I was listening to this video, which I feel like it seems like it's something he's made very, very recently. And it was about, Lon is part of the OTO, which is an organization I belong to. And I've met Lon. I mean, I've taken one of his classes, and I have also communicated with him like Messenger about, one or two things. But it's not like I talk to him every day or regularly. But but he is somebody who I've crossed his path before, and yeah, he's great. I have a lot of respect for him. He's very, very good. So Lon is what you call it? He was talking about angels, and the way in which he was kind of talking about this subject, he had said that people were talking to him about people who say that they chat with angels, and how they kind of think those people are obviously delusional or this or that. And the gist, I didn't get to watch the whole thing. I was only able to watch sort of the beginning of it, because I know Lon's position on working with I guess what we'll call them non-human entities, is he feels to a certain degree they're a reflection of our inner psychology. He does seem to have kind of a Jungian approach, because his book, I've talked about his book Low Magic, which is really good, but the subtitle of that is It's All in Your Head. It's just that your head is bigger than you think it is. So he feels that these are all kind of archetypal things that we're connecting into. Like, he is the one who had said that people who want to invoke demons do so because it reflects something in themselves that is a weakness. Like, okay, I need this demon because they represent some quality that I think that I lack. Okay, that's an example of how he thinks. Now, and again, I don't have a disagreement with that necessarily. There is always this question of what do we mean by psychology? When I was in graduate school, I remember that somebody in the class was talking to Dr. Austin and said something like, well, it's just merely psychology. And she goes, there's nothing mere about psychology. There's nothing mere, M-E-R-E. There's nothing mere about psychology. To say that something is happening on a psychological level doesn't mean you're just dismissing it as, oh, you're a delusional or something like that. Psychology is something that, yeah, I mean, there is definitely that inner-outer reflection. The psyche has a lot to do with not only how we connect with the world outside of us, but the psyche also has to do, possibly with things that are going on within us and within our own souls. And now, what doesn't that entirely mean? Do we think of that entirely in the idea of neurosis, psychosis, or do we think of it more in terms of the way that our soul develops? Because I feel like psychology is the science of the soul. And so I feel like a lot of this does have to do with the way our soul develops. Now, the reason I bring up this particular video of Lon's, because I don't know why, I have kind of a feeling, and I've kind of gotten a little bit of a confirmation that he may have decided to do this video, and I might be one of the people who he has been spoken to about. I can't prove that. I'd have to ask him probably directly, but I kind of feel like some people, because I'm rather public about my connection to Azrael. Okay. And there's a lot about what I've done in working with him that is probably atypical to people in that community who work with angels. Okay. Like, for example, a lot of the channelings I do, when I first started working with him, the channelings were very awkward. I'm not going to lie. I mean, there may be some good stuff in there, maybe, but I just feel like it's like he prefers to communicate in the angelic language, which is Enochian, which I mean, I had some experience with it, but was not really very well versed in it. I would still say I'm not very well versed in it. I'm better than I was, just through practice. But trying, so if he was trying to speak to me with Enochian words, I don't know how well I would be able to translate that. And I'm also don't always consider myself the best person to receive things in that way. Like, I don't feel like mediumship comes naturally, namely because I have a very strong intellectual, analytical kind of level that keeps wanting to jump in when you're doing this stuff. So that was a really kind of an exercise in just trying to let go and listen. And generally, as things came into my head, I'd say them out loud. And if I didn't feel like they were something that was coming out of my own stream of thoughts. But again, it's hard to know sometimes. So I can see people looking at that and going, And honestly, to even talk about having the kind of relationship, I don't exactly blame people if they are saying that, to say, yeah, that sounds weird and delusional, because obviously they're not experiencing it. So I feel like I need to address that in a couple of ways. First of all, I think there's a lot of people, particularly in that community, who tend to underestimate me. They tend to think like, look at me like, oh, like I'm a newbie, or I don't know anything, or I don't really know this stuff, especially the men. But they kind of treat you almost like, I can relate to being analytical is what Joanne says. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. But it's, yeah, I feel like there's this, oh, I don't know. I feel like there's this thing of people where they're kind of saying like, I don't know, like the connection to angels. I understand that it doesn't usually work like that. And normally people are usually invoking them in very specific settings, that they have very specific rules about how they do things. And for me, I kind of understand, yeah, them looking at that going, well, why are you doing it this way? Like that doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem authentic to them. But I have actually spoken with people in that organization, or people who have been part of it and are no longer part of it, and about this specifically. And there's a lot about my connection to Azrael that I don't make public to people, just because you really shouldn't. But then there's some things that, like, I've asked Azrael, I'm like, should I be putting this stuff up on the internet? He's like, yes, absolutely. This is something that he wants to say, but he's very awkward about saying it. Now, why would he be that way? Like, why does an intermediary, twinning down their noses? I get it. Yeah. That's what Joanna's saying. So, okay. So I feel like it's with Azrael, I think people might say like, well, why does an intermediary need an intermediary? That's where I was. And but the thing is, okay, he is he is an angel who is very much misunderstood by people. Okay. He is an angel who, when people hear angel of death, they generally, I remember the first time I was talking to Corinna up in Milford about it, and she's like, can we just say you talk to archangels? Like, do we have to mention that specifically? Because that will freak some people out. And yeah, and I can understand that people will feel that way. And it seems odd, but I also, if you actually research the angel of death, and actually a lot of people who do that kind of regular angelic work in the esoteric sense, in the esoteric, groups and societies and so forth, would be able to, would know about Azrael. And they know about a lot of his attributes, although I have found that not all of them, some of them tend to see him as being far darker than what he is. I think most people are stuck in the seeing is believing thought process, was Tuda saying. Yes, and actually, that's the whole thing. I'm kind of like that too. And they think there's certain rules that are for this work. And like I said, I have talked to people about my communications, and most people I've talked to privately say, yeah, this is what you're seeing is authentic. It's not, this is not you, just making this crap up, and there's days when I felt like that. Trust me. There's days when I've woken up being like, am I making all this crap up? I mean, is this really what's going on? But I have had, speaking to Suda's comment about seeing is believing, the thing is, people have seen Azrael. Sometimes I have seen him. Okay. But, me seeing him, we can all talk about that. They're full of themselves as the true Suda, or just full of themselves as the ultimate authority in the field. Well, yeah, but there's that issue too, Joanne, for sure. You're right. And there's a lot of people, right. They looked at, and that's what I think I was starting with this. A lot of people underestimate me in this field because they think like I don't know anything. And I'm like, I have been involved with different facets of this for at least 35, 36 years, sometimes longer than them. Yes, I know some people say, oh, you don't look like you've been doing it that long. Well, thanks, that's great. But I also don't try to walk around giving off the vibe of like I'm this master or this expert or whatever. And I mean, because I think that those people are just silly. But I mean, I guess if it's part of your shtick, and people like it, then go for it. But I don't feel any need to be that way. Oh, that's a different ballgame. Knowing more should lead to openness or curiosity, right? And I guess also too, though, within that field, there are people who I may or may not have seen him, is what Alex is saying. I'm pretty sure you did, because what I was seeing was the same thing you were seeing at the same time. So Alex, you're one person. And yeah, and then there's other people who have seen him and describe pretty much the same exact thing that Alex mentions when in classes that I've taught. Definitely do not think it's all in your head. No, and really, to me, the kind of crowning thing was the fact that my guru saw him. Okay, my guru is not somebody. She's not some flaky, lightweight, whatever. She is an authentic Sadhguru, and I mean, the way that she spoke to me when I came up for her for darshan last time, because she was just like, the look she gave me was just absolutely unbelievable. And then what she actually said to me just confirmed to me, I was flabbergasted by what she said. She's the last person I would have expected to see any, like I felt like she wasn't entirely sure what she was looking at. But there's that connection. It's there, and it's not just, so yeah, there is something beyond the psychology of, oh, well, I work in the area of death, so, or transition for people. Amma is the best, as Sudha's saying. She definitely is. Oh yeah, she is. And she knows. There might be people who are tempted to say, oh, she just hugs people, whatever. It's very interesting how sometimes people will make these kind of condescending judgments based on the superficial. And I'm like, no, you really need to, get in there and get involved, and you will see that there's no joke there, right? And again, she has thousands and thousands of followers, and so, and I am definitely not somebody who's going to be. I don't live in the ashram. I haven't been to the ashram. I don't follow her everywhere. There was a time when I did try to follow her around a little bit more. I don't do that now, and I hadn't seen her in years, so it's not like, oh yes, I know you, and I've looked at your website, or I'm into this thing. Like she has absolutely no way of knowing that. And the things she said to me, it literally, there's no way in heck did I expect her to say the things to me that she said. So, yeah, and that confirmed, I mean, and actually some of the things she said made me question certain other things as well. But certainly to me that there's been a lot of, I feel there's been a lot of external validation of the presence of Azrael. Okay. Just like I've had that with the Morrigan as well. And those are the two main ones. And again, you could get into a long discussion of why those two. And I've also talked about the fact that I always consider myself, I'm not a worshiper. I'm not like a devotee or a worshiper. And with angels, you really don't do that anyway. I mean, you can, light candles to angels or something, or pray to angels. People do that. But for me, it's not so much about that. For me, it's more like, I don't know, I'm like a vehicle for whatever their energy is and whatever it is they're trying to get out into the world. And in Azrael's case, I was starting to say about the fact that he's the angel of death. So he doesn't have a very good reputation. Let's put it that way. A lot of people look at Azrael like, he's something dark and scary and out of the depths of hell or something like that, which is why he gets very offended by that. He's just like, I'm from the highest heaven. Like I am not from, but he also doesn't really talk about hell in the way that people talk about it either. He said, no, I mean, he's not saying that there aren't abysses and depths where there are beings that he says, humans need to be careful how they traffic with them. And sometimes it's best if they don't, but he's not saying like, oh, there was this big fall and there's this big war. I mean, he does talk about a certain kind of war, but it's more in the Gnostic sense than the other. Again, an idea that I'm aware of, but not one that I've really subscribed to. Like I said, anybody who reads my book knows that I'm not a fan of that. I was never kind of a fan of the whole demiurge theory, because I often felt, because a lot of people, I knew a lot of people who were like, well, the Gnostic Christianity is something I embrace because because it's kinder to women, or you have like Gospels of Mary Magdalene, and you have all these things. I'm like, I don't know that it's kinder to women. Some aspects of it maybe, but I said, when you still have this idea of Sophia, the holy wisdom, as making a big oopsie and creating this being by herself, that to me, that's still blaming the woman. That's the Akamoth. Akamoth is the grief that is from this creating this thing by herself. So yeah. So anyway, I'm not. I don't know. As we also said, Gnosticism is not just one thing. But I'm not going to derail into that. Like I said, I will always guide people back to my Catonia conversation with Dan Hanley on Gnosticism, because to me, he is like one of the people I personally know who is the best versed in all of that literature. Like he knows it. He can literally quote it for you, and he can tell you exactly where it comes from, right off the top of his head. So he's the person that I usually ask questions about what we think of as Gnostic doctrines or Gnostic cosmologies. So, but again, so this is not something. It's like something I know something about, kind of enough to be dangerous, but I never something I really got deeply into. So the fact that a lot of this comes up is very strange to me. Now, mind you, I didn't, like I said, I haven't watched the rest of Lon's video, but he did make his opening comments were along the lines of, don't assume that somebody, because they say that, is being naive and delusional. So he said, don't assume that that's what's happening. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if when I watch the rest of it, if it's going to prove to be, and again, I don't even know that it's entirely about me. I just feel like I might be at least one person who he's been asked about, because we have the connection of that same organization. So I think, I'm wondering, I mean, but again, maybe not, maybe it has not come up at all. But the fact that I do this, and I do this publicly, and also in terms of channeling Azrael, I know I've gotten some people saying like, oh, well, you're channeling him. And, like there's the whole thing about I have transitional services. And one of the things that I offer is I will, doing that kind of channeling for somebody on an individual level, which people feel, some people feel like, oh, well, you shouldn't do that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. I have, for my work, I basically a flat hourly fee, whether you're doing Reiki with me, whether you're doing Rahani with me, whether you're doing, Rahani tends to be less because it gets a little bit less time. So sometimes I will do it for less, but it's basically I have an hour charge for anything that I do. And that's, whether I'm doing a tarot reading, whether I'm doing an astrology reading, whether I'm doing whether I'm doing something more transitional for somebody, extra kind of work, or whether it's just spiritual mentoring and people are talking with me, regardless of what it is, I have just one fee. It's not about that. So anything that I am doing, as part of our mentoring on your behalf. So if there becomes an occasion where I need to channel Azrael for somebody as part of that process, then that's what's included there. So yeah, so it's not so much that I don't know that I'm like the scribe or the last word, but I do feel like there's not a whole lot of information on Azrael, and some of what's out there is again, he's generally considered beneficent because he is the one who tries to help people at the time that they are transitioning. Like that's part of his mission. And I consider that part of my mission too. Like I am somebody here who tries to help people, particularly through crises and transitions. And oftentimes that's a messy process that, and not a linear one that takes one step at a time, and you could take 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of work that I do. And so, yes, there's a connection there between the kind of thing he does. But again, because you're dealing in this realm of the unknown and that in endings, in endings that are connected to beginnings, because I don't feel you don't have life without death. I mean, they go together. A lot of people though have been religiously kind of separated them in their mind. Oh, like, for example, St. Paul saying like Christ conquered death. And I'm like, well, and also Azrael is not death per se. Like he's not the Grim Reaper. A lot of people, there's a lot of misconceptions about him. And I think that maybe why the communication with me happens, at least one of the reasons why, is because if I'm here teaching people about this kind of stuff, if I was talking about the dark feminine over on Catonia, he may be trying to say, okay, well, you need to help people understand who I am, because I'm not what a lot of people think that I am. And I'm something that's here all the time, and people shriek in terror at the thought. And he's like, but I'm just always here. And not just, I don't mean just around me. I mean, in general, he's an angel that's always there and always watching. And he says, and people go on with their lives and I'm there watching and nothing happens, So I think there's kind of he's feeling there's a need for that. But I also feel like he is telling me things about things that are kind of shifting on a fundamental level in our cosmos. And again, I don't initially, like a year or two ago, I don't know if I would have even if somebody had talked to me about it. I think the reason I'm not so bothered exactly by people saying that is that I'm like, yeah, I mean, if I was on the outside of this too, I might be like, you're doing what? Like, you know, I could see people looking at it and thinking, yeah, that's weird. Because there's days I look at it and think, yeah, that's weird. So, or gee, that seems delusional, or it seems, but I don't know. I mean, and I do try to, I don't want to involve the mind too much, but at the same time, I feel like I have to involve it to the degree of being appropriately critical of what occurs. So I don't know. I just felt like when I saw that, I was like, okay, I feel like I have to kind of make a public statement about that, because I think among people in that community in particular, there is a misunderstanding of what it means to be, you know, what the kind of work that I do with Azrael is. And part of that is because there's the public work that I do, and then privately, there's other things. And the same is true of the Morrigan. Like when I was asked to write that book, Phantom Queen, which has not come out, and I don't know. I don't know if it ever will. I mean, they paid for it. Yeah, but peers should be supportive of one would think, is what Joanne is saying. You would think, but in that, well, and maybe you can relate to this experience to some degree, Joanne, but not, as we know, not everybody is. Even people who have the same belief systems. I mean, you have this in esoteric communities. You have this in, you know, pagan communities, witchcraft communities. I mean, you don't have people who are necessarily, who maybe should be supporting each other, but don't. They're more like they're in competition with each other or something. And it can get weird. And I know that's a whole other subject for sure. But I have always wanted to stay on the outside of that. I've always kind of made my own path. And yeah, I mean, this is not a path that I ever had any intention of going down. In fact, it's a path I really actively resisted for a very long period of time. But I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm like, well, you know what? Fuck it. This is what it is. Oh, and Joanne says, oh, I know it all too well. Oh, I know. We've had some offline discussions about that. But yeah, I have to just say, and Alex says, in a perfect world, for sure, I've had people tell me my main guy couldn't possibly be working with me in certain ways. Yeah, and that's just it, because there's people, and again, we talk about the concept of a gatekeeper, right? People who say, well, no, if you're working with this being, these are the criteria. And, you know, I understand that there's kind of an epidemic of things like in paganism where, you know, I work with Hecate and she's my best friend, you know, and I understand people kind of being like, do you really understand the gravity of the energy you're working with? Same, but they love to drag you down, drag you in. Why, I don't know. Collectively, you. Yeah, it's yeah. So I kind of right, and so yeah. So Alex's guide, yes, she the guide she works with. Basically, from everything I know, it sounds to me very authentic. I don't know. My whole thing is I don't know how people, in one sense, yes, there's certain qualities to that energy. And if what you're experiencing are not those qualities, or they don't connect in with it in some way, you might have to ask yourself the question, am I working with that energy? Am I working with an egregore? And also the problem of people approaching, especially pagan energies, from which I know Joanne, your friend Christine Marvel has talked about. Often people say that about Lilith. Yeah, Lilith's another one. People, you know, Lilith, Medusa, Hecate, you know, and people who are so into these energies. And I'm like, I mean, again, I don't know, maybe because the other side of that is you don't know if some of these energies are trying to connect with people in the way that they're going to understand. But sometimes the way people will talk about these energies, I'm like, you know, and because I've had a lot of people say that to me, like, oh, I've been doing all this work with Hecate, and why, you know, I thought she was going to help me, and all these things are going wrong in my life. I'm like, do you know what kind of energy she is? I mean, I'm not saying and again, people tend to look at it as a good evil thing, or if I'm working with her, then she's my best bud and she's going to protect me, and it's kind of like, it doesn't exactly work like that. They're going to, if you want to do the work with these kinds of beings, they're like, okay, you're going to be doing the freaking work, you know, and that can happen, and people are often not aware of that. But I have been doing certain work for a very long time, and my whole thing is just, I'm not going to stand there and assert that I'm working with Azrael if, you know, this is some little fantasy that I've conducted in my head. I have ample evidence that it is far from the case. and not all of it is shared publicly. And yes, probably maybe if that's the only thing people are seeing, they might say, oh, well, that doesn't sound right. Exactly. People get stuck in the cookie cutter outlines. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Alex. Joanne says, trust me, Medusa will drag you through your shadow, kicking and screaming. Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of them will. And excuse me, God, somebody's trying to say something. But yeah, I mean, this is, to me, I've just gotten to a point where I can't be apologizing for it for people, or saying, oh, like you shouldn't say this to people or you shouldn't do this to people. And I'm like, no, because this is what it is. And I realize there are people out there who are going to think it's bizarre and are not going to accept it. And people who are not going to really, now, first of all, they don't talk to me about it. And Kelsey says, I tend to keep my practice super close to my chest because of how rigid people can be. Well, exactly. And yes, I agree with you there, because a lot of this is very personal to us. And our connections are personal, and they're not, I mean, they could be tied up in our ancestry. They could be tied up in whatever it is about our soul. We may get messages about that, but we don't exactly know what our souls are like. And I think when it comes to human souls, there seems like there could be, I don't know, we live in a big interdimensional universe, and we don't quite understand how the soul works. I mean, I know how Azrael has told me that the soul works, but can I objectively prove that? No. Okay, I can't objectively prove that. But then again, a lot of these people who have these encounters, they can't objectively prove it either. They can just say, no, I went through it, I did the ritual, I have the experience. Okay, and that's kind of where I'm at. I have the experience, and again, there's been a huge number of people externally, and I'm not seeking external validation of my experience. I'm not, but people have managed to externally validate it. So it's, yeah, and even writing Phantom Queen, I was very uneasy about writing that book in a lot of ways. The academic part of it was very interesting, but trying to talk about my practices, I'm like, I can't really do anything but maybe suggest some guidelines. I'm not going to tell people like how to worship the Morrigan, because I don't. I don't worship any of these beings because I don't feel that that's the way to approach them. And like I said, angelic work has been completely, I know enough about how it works and how it goes, and it tends to be very rule oriented, which I think is why a lot of people are like, well, you don't just go in and talk to an angel. I'm like, well, if you have a connection to them, and again, it's not something I would have expected, but there does seem to be, the more and more that the longer this connection goes on, the more I'm starting to feel, I'm probably only scratching the surface, but really just starting to feel what this connection is and why it's there. And there's certain aspects of it that, yeah, I'm not going to share it with anybody, except maybe people who I feel really understand this kind of work and who can say to me whether or not they think I'm crazy, right? So I share it with very, very few people, and I think most people who are not going for the aesthetic do keep it close to their chest. But I feel like in Azrael's case, he is somebody who is misunderstood, maybe even within that community, because I think there's a lot of people who think he's going to be involved in dark magic and stuff like that. And it's not that he's he's used the word, he's often said no, that, he's talked about vol Alpert, I work for the light. I don't, and again, when we say light, we don't mean fluffy bunny, like, I don't know. The term light worker kind of turns my stomach a little bit, only because I feel like it's that dichotomized way of looking at things. I work for the good guy, and then the other people work for the bad guy. And it's not like that. It's not that simple. Oftentimes what we judge good or bad has more to do with our comfort or discomfort with those things. But the Azrael thing is way, way real. And it's not anything I'm afraid of, because he's not one to be afraid of. That said, I don't know if he's an energy that everybody, wants to work with. Whatever reason, that's an energy that I work with, and I'm very physically aware of him, and people have experienced him in different ways. Some people have only experienced him like through voice. Like I will be talking and they'll say, what's the matter with your voice? Your voice is changing. And I'm like, is it? Like, I don't notice it. Other people do. But I feel almost like, to me, especially my guru, that was one of the big pieces of validation for me that, okay, this is not something that's simply a manifestation of something in my psychology. You know what I mean? I mean, it could be tied up in that too. I'm not saying that that's entirely wrong because, as I said, there's nothing mere about psychology. But any case, I don't feel that that video that I saw was meant to be a critique. I mean, maybe to some degree, but more like trying to help maybe people understand what it might mean to work with angels. So again, and I don't know whether, or maybe I'm projecting too, right? Maybe I'm looking at it and thinking, but no, I kind of got, I had asked the question. I said, am I at least one of the people he's talking about here? And I kind of got a yes. Like, yes, like that's been mentioned to him, just within the organization that we're in, probably, that, oh, there's somebody who's a member who claims that they do that to me is a totally feasible thing. So, you know, and again, with those kinds of people, I'm like, well, you could ask me about it directly, but they frequently don't. They kind of, you know, they gossip about it among themselves, but they don't actually talk to you, which I think is interesting. But again, not entirely unexpected. So I'm like, no, I just feel like I need to just maybe clarify that's what the connection is. And so I don't want people to think that, you know, that I'm just going out like I've just kind of gone off the deep end now, or fallen into the abyss, and now I think like, oh, and it doesn't. I don't feel, trust your gut. If it felt like a snub, it is. Yeah. Well, I don't feel like Lon is the one who's doing the snub. I feel like somebody has said something to him, and because the gist of his video was, well, don't assume that because somebody says they're talking to angels that they're full of crap. Like he's not. I feel like it was more of a defense of it. Although I'm sure it was like a qualified defense, because he doesn't want it to be like, hey, yeah, everybody who says we're talking to angels is talking to angels. They're too self-important to be direct. Well, yeah. And some of them, I think, too fearful, because I do have a habit of telling people exactly what I think of them, especially in that community, especially if they try to come across as very self-important to me, or try to command me in some way. And I have a general response to people who try to tell me that, you know, that I'm this way or that way, and I'm like, oh yeah. Anyway, we'll try to keep this a profanity clean live stream, but I have told people like that off before, to their face. So yeah, so I'm sure there's some people who are wary of talking to me about those things. Anyway, okay, our reading for today. And Joanne's laughing. Yeah. Because, and I don't know, I do have a very fiery nature. I am not that way at all with clients. I should be clear about that. I don't do that to people who are working with, or I'm coaching, because I'm realizing people are going through different stuff, and we just try a way to connect. But when I have people who try to very self-importantly tell me that they know about me, and that they know better than me, and that, you know, I'm this or I'm that, and I'm just like, yeah, I have some choice words for those people, and they don't generally like it, but, you know, oh well, then don't say it. Anyway, our central card is the laziness card. Actually, this does totally apply to me today, because I have things I need to do and don't feel like doing them. But as we mentioned with this card before, here's all the neat black and white little squares. And Joanne says, no, but we are human. No, it's true, absolutely. And what we're seeing in the background here is this almost like this breaking up. So it's almost like those neat black and white patterns are breaking up. And Kelly says, I've always felt you've been a really reliable source. I was drawn to you instantly, and your logical mind helps me feel you're trustworthy. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I cannot go out there and make statements about things that I think are BS. I just can't. And I can't claim to have experiences that I haven't had. So if I tell you that I've had an experience, or I tell you that then it's something that I've had to verify with myself. And I'm actually the hardest person to verify with it, because I'm inclined to try to write everything off and dismiss it, you know, and say, you know, think about that, right? So, yeah, but I'm sure there are people out there who feel that way. So I don't know. I need to listen to the rest of what Lon says. I kind of had started, and then I had to go to an appointment, so I didn't get to listen to the rest of it. So I will see what he has to say. And I'm sure he's going to talk. It sounds like he's going in the direction of, well, these can be a projection of people's psychology. And yes, to a certain degree, that's true. There's something more to it with this, though. And that's the argument you're always going to have in that community. There's going to be people who say, is this a quote unquote merely psychological thing, but back to mere psychology? Or is it something truly is this an energy you're truly interacting with? Okay, that is always the question, and probably the answer is a little bit of both. Okay, so yeah, and so I try to kind of keep it in that realm, but those are the two beings I have worked with, and have had some very profound, and the nature of some of the experiences they're mind-blowing to me. They would be mind-blowing to somebody else, but I don't feel the necessity to share them with everybody. And sometimes there are things that I've been told not to share. So anyway, so yeah, so I appreciate the vote of confidence from Mango Witch, because it's yeah, it's very yeah, because honestly, I just don't, I have like no capacity to BS anybody. I don't tend to accept BS, and I also don't tend to, I can't tell people something that's not true. I just simply wouldn't say it probably. Okay. So we have this card, laziness. But laziness, again, this has to do with moving into a new paradigm, thinking about something differently, right? Getting rid of our little black and white view of the world, which, you know, this guy's sitting here under like his beach umbrella with his little pina colada. It's very, very comfortable. I understand the way everything is. And here's all the neat little orderly squares. And in the meantime, behind you, there's a force coming up that's going, nope, we're about to disrupt the whole thing. And the inner feeling of which we are unaware. Okay, so we have our Three of Cups, the card of celebration. I think this is about socializing, kind of wanting to connect with people, and wanting to connect with people in a joyous kind of a way, in a celebratory or kind of a way. You know, this is about wanting to connect with people, not wanting to cut ourselves off from them, right? So yeah, there's definitely an internal feeling of wanting to reach out and wanting to connect. And I think if it's talking about this in terms of this kind of work, and not just for myself, but anybody else who might be doing this, a lot of times it means our viewpoints on things are going to be challenged. But you know, but there's a desire to reach out to community. Let's put it that way. And the external feeling of which we are aware, yeah, this is the tug of war between the head and the heart. Okay, this is the Two of Swords. Like the things that the places where we stay frozen because we're not sure whether we listen more to our thoughts or whether we listen more to the heart. And really, in a certain sense, you kind of have to drop both and just go for it, right? Movement doesn't happen. You can be easily paralyzed. Two of Swords is about a lack of movement. So I feel like it's easy to become paralyzed in a situation when, you know, when you want to connect and you feel like, you know, there's you feel like the community is casting kind of doubt on you, or doubt on what you're doing, or do you cast it on yourself? I mean, it doesn't always have to be, we can see it in the external world, but oftentimes it has to do with something that's going on internally as well. So yeah, so I don't know. There's the fact that our viewpoints on things have to shift. Internally, yeah, we want to connect with other people. We want to expand our horizons. We want to learn things. Externally, we may feel stuck because it may feel like it doesn't fit into the appropriate script. Like, well, it can't be this way. It has to be black or white. And so therefore we're like, well, which do I choose here? And it's like, well, it's not about choosing. Okay. Yeah. The advice card we have is comparison. Okay. So not comparing yourself to others, which is interesting. Yeah. When we have our experiences, you've got the tree trunk here and you've got the bamboo stalk. Now, both of them are plants, right? But they're both very different plants that grow very differently and in very different environments. And for one to look at the other and say, well, if I'm going to be a plant, I have to be, you know, like I have to be like this, or this has to be like this. If you're going to compare yourself, it's saying don't compare. You are not that. You know, you are you, and you have your experiences and you have what you have to offer. This is not about saying, oh, but this other person does it this way, or it's got to be like this, or it's got to be like that. It's like you don't, it's not like you're trying to measure up to somebody's thing. And finally, we have, I was just talking about the threes. Now we have the Three of Swords, which is the isolation card. Now, Three of Swords, if you see the figure here, this figure is like weeping, okay? And their tears are like, they have actually like golden tears, which is interesting. And you've got this ice. And so the whole idea is that through the heart, okay, because when you have a lot of grief that you carry, a lot of times when we carry grief, we're just kind of like, well, you know, we're very stoic about it, right? Like, okay, well, that's just how life is. But when we actually shed tears, when you actually open up emotionally and release, that is what breaks the ice. Okay, that's what, because what can happen is then we feel frozen out. We feel like we're not connected to people. But the expression of what's in the heart is what where the connection is. We don't want to go with these very limiting kind of judgments, because Five of Swords, even not in this deck, has a lot to do with limiting judgments, as does Three of Swords. These are things that are intended to separate. But there's actually, it's interesting. There's 3 sword cards around the edge in terms of consciously what we're doing. And they come out of somebody who feels very, very comfortable in this kind of a space. Like, well, I know how it is. This is how it is. But again, there's this big non-Euclidean stuff going on kind of behind them, saying, no, everything's kind of being torn up. What you thought you knew is being torn up, And I think that's part of the bigger picture here, too. We are in a space where the way we have assumed everything has worked, it feels like it's all flipping around right now. And the full reasons for that, well, heck, I don't know. I mean, if I did, then, but there's we definitely see it in the astrology. We definitely see it in different places that there's going to be a massive paradigm shift here. And so we need to kind of be more in the space. And internally, this is where we want to be. We want to connect with others, and we just kind of, I don't know. And internally, maybe there's a sense of, I don't care. I'm going to let my hair down and do it the way that I'm going to do it. And I'm going to, celebrate with my tribe and the people who, who understand or care to understand. But I don't think, again, these readings are not meant to be just for me. So I do feel like to a certain degree, we are feeling like we want to connect with others. But part of this disconnect comes from not wanting to recognize being stuck, because we may feel certain things and our head may contradict what it is that we're feeling. Like, oh, well, we have to do it this way, or we have to do it this way. But it's saying, no, a part of what we're being pushed towards, part of what's moving here is we're moving towards new information and new ways of doing things. Even in the sciences, one of the things I was talking about, there's that James Webb telescope that's out in space. And a lot of the things that it's finding on the edge of what they call the Hubble sphere, it's kind of going out very, very far. There's only a number, I think they said it's 93 billion miles or something. Anyway, there's a range past which we're not going to be able to see, even with really good telescopes. So there's a discussion of what's kind of on those edges, and what they're finding there is kind of throwing everything that they thought they knew about physics and the age of the universe and this and that into disarray. So, you know what I mean? It's like there's new information coming in, and to sit there and be paralyzed by second guessing ourselves and saying, oh, well, I can't say this, or I shouldn't do this, and I shouldn't, we're in a time period where I think we're questioning everything that we know. So, yeah. So anyway, that's just what I have for today. That's what came up for me this morning. I hope that was interesting, enlightening, but yeah, I do feel sometimes like, because like I said, I put the information out there about what I do, but I feel like a lot of people don't, and who has time to watch a lot of videos, right? But, I feel like people don't necessarily either read what I have on my website, or they don't watch the video I have explaining how this whole relationship came to be in the first place. So sometimes I feel like I have to clarify that for people. So anyway, it's already 8:18, so I'm going to get going. Thank you guys so much for being with me today. It was great to see everybody. And I should be, what is tomorrow? Thursday? Yeah, I will be back tomorrow morning, and I'll have another live stream. And I'll also be on the Katonia live stream at noon today. And the new podcast is going to drop today if you're not on Patreon and haven't seen it or heard it yet. So I will see all of you very, very soon. I hope you all have a great Wednesday. It is Wednesday. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what day of the week it is. Thanks, you are amazing. Oh, thank you, Joanne. Very sweet. And you're amazing too. Everybody here is amazing, actually. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day.